Notice of this meeting was advertised in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Ms. Trueblood will be absent this evening. Mr. Cartier?
Present.
Mr. Tompkins?
Here.
Ms. Jackson?
Present.
Mr. Allen?
Present. This meeting is now called to order. Closed session resolution number 218-2016 authorizes council to go into closed session. Solicitor, Business Administrator, Council, do we have any closed session items this evening?
I have nothing, Council President.
I have nothing.
Hearing none. Public comments. This portion of the meeting allows the public to come forward with any comments, either general or from the agenda. Ms. Quinn.
Good evening.
Good
Ann
evening.
Quinn, Browns Mills. Couple of questions, please, on this agenda, starting with 219-2016. Authorizes cancellation of unexpended appropriations and other open balances. Where is this money going?
Nowhere. It's the money's actually being canceled.
And why are we transferring under 224216? Why are we transferring 191,000?
I'm sorry, which, you said 219, correct?
Yeah, and then I just moved.
224.
Yeah, you're on another resolution, I believe. I think you're on 224.
That's what I said.
She was asking a question about the first one, then she jumped to another one,
Okay.
Jason.
So, you're on-
224,
What's your next question?
224-2016. We're transferring funds totaling $191,000.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it being transferred to and why?
The funds are being transferred to a different department. And they're being transferred there because we need the funds in those departments.
Can I help you out, Jason?
Well, you can make your comment, but
Okay.
yeah.
And what happens a lot of times with your budgets, and it happens a lot on federal level, is the budget's a blueprint on where you're going to do your spending. But you're not going to know where all the dimes are going to fall throughout the year. So it's your best guess is what the budget does. And as you get closer to the end of the year, things get a little bit tighter. So sometimes you run out of money in one department and you have a surplus in another department.
I understand.
So you have to shuffle it around, and that's what this is. And I'm actually going to pull this one for questions later on.
Okay, I was just curious where it was going.
Just trying to help.
No worries. Can I go under new business or
Anything you like.
Public Works number 3? We're purchasing a trailer.
That's actually going to be pulled from the agenda.
Okay. Just out of
But
curiosity.
yes, it is.
I'm sorry.
It
It
is a
is
trailer.
being pulled. One more time, Jason. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It's going to be removed from the agenda until possibly the next meeting.
Okay. With respect to under new business B, under Chapter 145 Property Management, Maintenance of Vacant Properties, Registration Requirements and Fees, can somebody elaborate on that? Excuse me.
What exactly are you asking us to elaborate on?
Well, it says a discussion. I'm just curious as to if this is the only time I can make public comment. I'm asking.
Well, we had, this ordinance was actually discussed a few years ago, and a few meetings ago we had a few residents come forward with, well, I shouldn't say residents,
Business concerns?
business owners, investors, however they want to be referred to as, that came forward with some questions. So we thought maybe it would be a good idea to put it back on the agenda for
Further
additional discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing no hands. Before we read the consent agenda, could I go ahead and just remove this from?
Yeah, you can do it tonight. It's your meeting.
Okay, council, before we move to the consent agenda, we will be removing under new business A3, the Public Works purchase of the trailer for $2,657.70. That will be removed from the agenda. Consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the Township Council and will be enacted by one motion. Should a council member wish to discuss a consent agenda item separately, that item can be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the regular agenda. Council, is there anything that you would like discussed?
Yes, Mr. Allen, I'd like to pull 219, 2016, 224, 2016, 226, 2016, and 227, 2016.
Are there any others? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Amy, please poll the council.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Cartier?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. Jack, resolution number 219.
Yeah, my questions are kind of the same way with Ms. Quinn had. It looks like we got grants for doing curb cuts in 2013. Is this a different grant than what we used to do the curb cuts that were done a few years ago?
I believe it's the same grant. We had money that we did not expend for curb cuts because the curb cuts were intended to go in areas where we were unable and unsuccessful in getting grant funds for the sidewalks. And it was decided that we didn't just want to build the curb cuts to nowhere without the sidewalks.
There are a few of them out.
Yeah, so rather than spending, even though it was state money, it's still tax money, so we just said, listen, we're not going to expend it. So therefore, this is the cleanup, essentially, on paper of...
We're sending the money back to the state.
Basically, yeah. We didn't never get the money because we didn't ask for it, but this, so the state is well aware of it, and they've been told that we weren't going to spend the money. But what this does is this cleans up our financial documents, which is...
I remember recently, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm still going to ask a stupid question, forgive me. Recently we had discussion in here about doing curb cuts in the future, near future, and I asked for one place to be added on the list of curb cuts over by Kay's Laundry. We can't use 2016 money in fiscal 2017, is that correct?
Yeah, this is a grant that's essentially closed out.
Okay.
From it's 2013 money.
And that's what I thought. That's why I said 2013, 2017. That's what I thought, but thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's correct. And then as to the other item, the council had previously authorized the use of those funds for a couple of eligible homeowners. Mm-hmm. The homeowners backed out doing it at the last minute, and there wasn't very much time left before we were required to finalize the project towards the end of a calendar year. So there was not sufficient time to have any new projects and new property owners income qualified in order to spend the funds. So that's the reason why that money has to be zeroed out as well.
Okay, answered my questions.
Is there a motion to approve Resolution 219-2016?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Amy, please poll the council.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Cartier?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. Resolution number 224-2016. Jack, you requested that be pulled.
Yeah, and like you heard me say earlier, I kind of know the shuffle of the money at the end of the year, and you expect it. But one of the expenses that we're putting the money into is legal services, and it doesn't specifically say we have prosecutor, solicitor, public defender. What is this going into?
That's the general category of legal services that does not pertain to the prosecutor or the public defender. It's for services provided by Mr. Bear and his firm with regard to ongoing litigation and, as an example, the various real estate transactions where his firm has been working on. We are continuing with litigation, the PBA lawsuit against us on the overtime. That's been in full motion recently, so we expect that it will be costing us a few more dollars in terms of legal bills.
So the $215,000 we budgeted for this year wasn't enough?
Well, I can tell you that it's not going to be enough. Whether we will need to use that full $30,000 or not, I really can't tell you right now. We may not. Last year we did a transfer of $20,000 or $30,000, and we ended up using only $7,000 more. The reason that it's done this way by our chief financial officer in requesting these transfers is so that we don't have to come back and provide another and ask for another transfer in December is just enough. Because ultimately, if the money's not spent, it goes into the fund balance anyway.
And it says those are all. It's also for labor council and special counsel.
Yeah, it would be labor.
It's not just.
I thought you were going to buy a new car, Andy.
There you go.
Well, the general category also includes labor
But
council.
I understand. Still, you have to ask the question.
No, I'm not critical of it in any way. I was just saying it was not just for the general counsel services. It's also labor councils. In all their work they've been doing this year as well.
And I do remember one or two meetings ago where we had the $18,000 foreclosure thing that I had questioned. It was kind of unusually high, so I understand.
Yep.
The next one was the engineering. We had budgeted $72,000 for the engineering, and now we're putting in another $45,000, which is more than 50% of what we had initially budgeted.
It is, and throughout the course of the year, as a variety of projects come up that we had not anticipated when the budget was first adopted, we ask our engineers to perform additional services, and that is what has happened. Some of those projects include the grants that we have obtained. So it's also assistance in preparing the grants and preparing the plans, because some of those grants you cannot use the funds for engineering and design purposes, and that's why the money has come up. So it will go up if we end up during the course of the year after the budget is cut receiving another grant. And also it also depends on how our road program is going and whether we need specific engineering design services for some streets as opposed to others, and whether we anticipated a drainage issue, then the engineers would have to participate. If there are no drainage issues, then our folks, can do it without the engineers, and that's why it sort of fluctuates.
Okay, and then my final one for this one, solid waste. Is that the one where we have a contract with these folks, or is this something different?
There are two solid waste costs that we have. One is to the contractor that picks up the solid waste, and then the other one is for the cost of dumping of
The tonnage.
the tonnage, which goes up and down.
Right.
Our CFO wanted to put in $10,000 because he's concerned that we might be a little bit over the plan. I'm not entirely sure that it will go over, but to play it safe, he just wants to throw in, especially since the total budget transfer is less than 1% of the total budget. So.
Okay, thank you.
Administration, quick question. We talked about this previously, but can you discuss why we would have excess money left over in like the salary and wages for the various departments?
Sure. There are a couple of general reasons why that would happen. Is employees might retire during the course of the year when we did not anticipate that they would retire, and therefore the balance of their salaries from the day they retire is not paid from the salary and wage line item. And in cases, as an example, in police, you might have a police officer that costs us $110,000 a year retire, after 25 years of service, and then, although there isn't a current list, and if we hired a new police officer, the new police officer would cost us a lot less. Also, when employees are out of work on workers' compensation claims, costs, a substantial portion of their pay comes to us, is reimbursed to us from the joint insurance fund under our workers' compensation program. So that's why the numbers can fluctuate. Also, in some instances, we have a need for more overtime or less overtime, and that's why sometimes it's a little bit, the spending is a little bit faster paced, and sometimes it's a little slower.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to accept it. Resolution 224-2016 authorizes the transfer of funds in the fiscal year, or calendar year 2016 budget totaling $191,000.
I'll second.
Amy, please poll the council.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Cordier?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. Jack, you requested to pull resolution 226, 2016.
Yeah, this one, a couple questions. I understand it's just permission to prepare the grant, but usually we have some kind of idea what the grant is and some of the details involved. And this one, it doesn't have any dollar value to it. It's just saying, yeah, go ahead and do the grant. But is there any matching funds required for the grant if we were to put in for it and get approved?
The grant's going to be applied for the streetscaping of Juliustown Road, the redevelopment area all the way out to Clubhouse. And the idea is that we redo our sidewalks, our curbing, our street lighting, everything that sits in front of all our businesses. As you know, we're working towards redeveloping Juliustown Road in the business side of it, which is purchasing the businesses we've purchased. We've tore them down. We're purchasing additional businesses. We're supposed to close on JC's Market, I believe, sometime late in December. That'll be scheduled for closing. We're still negotiating funds, but we also want to try and obtain funding for the streetscaping, which will go along with this project, the finishing touches. Like, you're building a house, and we're applying for funds to put the trim up. Now we want to get that. The number that we're throwing around right now in this application, somewhere in the area of $1.3 million worth of funding.
And is this a county road or a township road?
It is a county road.
So wouldn't they be funding something like that instead of us?
Well, they would if we were getting the streets done. We're talking curbing in to the business, not out. So this is our responsibility and our ability to apply for this funding and our benefit if we receive it.
And we were also looking at getting a developer in there, correct? To do some work if we do go forward with the plan?
We will solicit a developer on the project for the business side. Once we assemble all the properties needed, then we'll solicit a developer to come in and present us with options on developing that strip. The first phase that we're working on now from
Could we have that
CDS to
developer pick up this piece of work?
Well, you could look at that expense to be pushed off into the project, but there's grants available for these type of applications. There's specific grants for this type of stuff. And I emphasize the word grants because that's free money. That's the money that if we don't take it, another town will be applying for it, and another town will put streetscaping in or something else applicable to the grant. So this is the way we have found to do the projects, the many projects that we do here in the community without going to the taxpayers and saying, we'll let the residents pay. The residents ultimately pay, but instead of just Pemberton residents paying, all of New Jersey residents pay for our grants.
Yeah, it's not free money, it's taxpayer money.
Exactly, but we spread it out further throughout the state, which someone else is going to do if we're not applying. Millville will apply, and our tax dollars, that little bit that each resident puts in, will be paid for Millville's project or another town, Newark's project, whatever. But the idea is to get the projects done here in Pemberton at the cheapest cost to our residents, and this is the way we can achieve that without going to our residents and assessing our residents the full burden of any type of project.
If I may, the other thing that one would want to do this in a development area is that you reduce the cost to the developers of the public improvements, thereby making it more competitive among prospective developers, and essentially through a grant create an incentive for the development of the project.
Answer my questions, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve Resolution 226-2016?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Amy, please poll the council.
Mr. Cartier?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Tompkins?
No.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. Jack, you requested to pull Resolution 227-2016?
Yeah, this is where we're looking for more grant money. And it's an amount of $250,000 for Blueberry Manor Park, Presidential Lakes Beach Park. Gene, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher the name, I'm sorry.
Hammerman.
Thank you. Basketball court, and then the West End Park. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with this. Well, first off, are we going to have matching on this one as well? Are we going to have to put in $250,000 to get $250,000?
Absolutely not.
Usually in the resolution, it would describe if there's a cash match associated with the grant application, correct?
Well, remember, we're applying for the grant, so before you accept the grant, that information will be supplied to you. You'll know that this particular grant has no cash match. And again, here we are with a grant. This is the grant that we've approved every year. I believe once since I've been in office, they didn't offer it to us, or not as much. I think we might have gotten it every year, but we got a reduced amount one year.
If I recall, we weren't ready for it, and I don't think we applied for it that 1 year.
The 1 year, yeah, there was an issue, but it was the first year, that's what it was,
Right.
because it was the acquisition of the property on
Right.
Scrapetown Road, and they told us we could acquire property through it, and then they changed the rules midstream. But every grant that we've applied for, other than the first one they put out, we've received, and this is the grant that we use to build our parks, all of our parks that we've been doing, and kudos to council to support this because it's been a phenomenal program, and I encourage you, as I have in previous meetings, take a ride up to Bayberry Park and see the newest park going in, thanks to this particular grant, Mirror Lake Beach. This grant, there's just park after park, and these parks that are listed here are parks that are in need of repair. The basketball court up in Country Lakes, Gene Ammerman Park, needs repair. The Blueberry Manor Park, we've actually took that park out because it was in such poor shape that we removed it as an embarrassment. Actually, we don't like to display that type of infrastructure in our community, and we're good about cleaning things up like that. And we are preparing to put a new park in there also. And the same with West End. We're working a large project on the West End Park. That's our largest park. That's the one we've got the $1.1 million Green Acres going there. There's some additional funding from another Parks Development grant invested in that project now. Parks Development grant purchased that property actually, and this will, one that we're applying for, will allow us to put a walk bridge across to the back section of that park. So that's
going into Oak Pines?
No, that's going into the back section of the park, our property.
Okay. And what are we doing out in Presidential Lakes?
Presidential Lakes, if you go out there and look at that park, you'll see the equipment is very outdated, and it needs to be replaced out there also.
Okay.
This is down at the beach.
Answers my questions. Any other questions on that? Make a motion to approve 227-2016 for a grant for $250,000.
Second.
Amy, please poll the council.
Mr. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Cartier?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. Moving on, new business, discussion of Chapter 145, property maintenance, maintenance of vacant properties, registration requirements and fees. Council, a few meetings ago, there were people here to discuss portions of this vacant property chapter, and there was a request from council to add this to an agenda.
I think I was actually the one that asked to have it added, Jason. Do you mind if I start in on some of the questions I have or comments?
Go ahead.
I give a little bit of background on this, where I stand on it. I've been coming to a lot of these meetings for a long time, and I remember residents, and I was sitting back there where everyone else is sitting right now, residents coming in here and complaining about the houses being empty, people are moving away, the grass is tall, things are falling down, no one's controlling it, and it was turning into a real eyesore and a hazard. And it was brought before the council, and the council, if I remember right, now this is going back 2013, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's a long time, so if I remember right, the council was looking at getting a control measure in place to try to force the banks to maintain the properties, and if they had them in their inventory for a long time, they would sell these properties and get them back in to have somebody move into them and maintain them and be a home again for somebody. I thought it was a great idea. But somewhere along the line, it has turned into not a tool to get people back into the houses and to maintain the properties. It's become a revenue stream, and I don't think that's correct. I don't think we should be using it for that. Hopefully, someday this ordinance won't be needed because all of our homes will be lived in and taken care of, and it won't be an issue. Unfortunately, I've done a lot of walking around in our neighborhoods, and I don't see that time coming anytime soon. But I'm looking at, I'm looking at the way this is written, and unfortunately I wasn't here when this was for open public comment. I think I was probably in Thailand at the time. But I read this a couple weeks ago and I looked at it, and there's a lot of places in here that I really dislike it. And I'm talking to some of the folks that have been hit with these registration fees, and I don't think it does our residents any. I think it needs to really be adjusted because it's not doing our residents any good. One of the things that I've heard a few times is somebody's mother or father will pass away, and the house will be willed to one of the children. And while they're dealing with the death and arrangements of their loved one, 30 days later, they're subject to a $500 housing registration fee because the house has been sitting vacant for 30 days. I think that's outrageous. I don't think that should be done at all. I'm sorry. To penalize our residents that way and in a time of grief is just, I don't agree with it, not at all. There's a couple things in here that I went through: vacant property, and on the first page, under definitions, and it says substantially all lawful construction operations or residential occupancy has ceased. But you know, sometimes when you're doing construction, you have weather delays, you have delays while you're waiting on material to come in. It could be waiting on code enforcement to come in and do an inspection or something. There's a lot of things that can delay construction, and then sometimes things happen where you're inside working on the house. You could be painting the walls, you could be doing trim, you can be hanging cabinets, you can be doing all kinds of things inside this house where people would think there's no construction going on, but it's really happening. So it's kind of subjective, in my opinion, and I think everyone's heard me up here say when we do these, they really should have clear-cut understanding and meeting and not be easily misinterpreted. And I think this is one of those cases where it's not right. It's just not right. The next section, 145-44A, general requirements within 30 days after assuming ownership of a vacant property. You have to file a registration if it's still vacant. Sometimes, if you're military and you buy a house, I'm retired military, you buy a house, sometimes you're in transit more than 30 days, or sometimes your household goods and stuff like that takes more than 30 days. So you're waiting for your materials to come in to move into your home, you're going to be paying $500 for this registration fee.
Jack, before you move on from that point,
Yeah.
Dennis and I spoke about this prior to the meeting. The definition of vacant property, can you explain what that legally occupied means in that definition, or Andy? How would that apply to someone that is in the military that might be stationed somewhere else for 3 months? Legally occupied means
Well,
that
if you, like, for instance, if you live in a home and you go away like I know some elderly people who go to Florida for the winter because they don't like the cold weather. They're still in legal occupation of their home for the winter months when they're in Florida. And here, if they were in Browns Mills during the rest of the year, they would still be legally occupying their home. I don't think it's been, and it hasn't been interpreted or enforced that way.
I've actually heard people say that they've been notified of a registration fee requirement because they have had zero water usage at their property for an extended amount of time. Which
How many years?
Andy,
About 2?
Andy, I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
2 years.
I'm telling you what I'm hearing.
I think that's an extreme example of what you're giving.
I think I've heard it from more than one person.
Nah. Anyway, I don't know about that, but I'm just saying that.
But it goes into what I said earlier. There's interpretations here, and you talk to 10 different people, and you get 10 different interpretations. And when you're doing a law, it shouldn't be that way.
I think, though, I don't know if I would suggest, and there's certainly nothing wrong with examining an ordinance to see whether it's working or not. I think that's exactly what you guys should be doing. But I think maybe you should get some information from Mr. Benedetti about how it's been...
I'm not allowed to talk to Mr. Benedetti, I'm sorry.
You can make that request through Mr. Gonzalez or the mayor for a report in terms of how it's been interpreted and how it's been enforced, so that to see if the concerns you're raising are actually out there in the real world or not. Because, I mean, they don't get to my level. I mean, they don't get, it's being handled internally, but my suggestion would be to get that information, because I think that there's a lot, I mean, most of anything that's ever been brought to my attention are matters where usually involving banks and foreclosed homes, and trying to get information about, at least from my office, where we could serve notices to banks that are out of state and that kind of thing. So I haven't seen, at least in the law department, enforcement from below that perspective.
If I may, there have been absolutely no issues whatsoever in our municipal court with regard to the interpretation of any provision of Chapter 145 or its enforcement, either by the prosecutor or by the municipal judge.
Well, I know the municipal court has upheld the ordinance.
It's exactly, and has made determinations on summonses that have been issued, and it applies to any owner of the property, not just banks. I don't know where that came from.
Am I the only council member that has a problem with this ordinance?
Well, I'm still waiting to see what exactly your issue is. I mean, you bounced around. You mentioned the fee schedule, but you didn't mention what your suggestion would be for the fee schedule.
I haven't gotten to the fee. Well, the first month or first year is $500, yes.
And again, but just so we're clear, this fee schedule is designed to get a property owner, i.e. a bank, to do something with the property. So that's why they're scheduled like this, the registration, the renewal, the second year, and the subsequent.
And I have, as long as it's for the bank, I have no problem for that.
So what about a property owner? What about a property?
I'm having a problem.
But what about a property owner that is not doing anything with a property? That property would still be an eyesore, even if it's not a bank. So you still want that property owner to do something with the property. If they're renting out the property.
Or not doing anything with the property.
We cannot apply the ordinance differently to the owner of the property just because one happens to be a bank, one happens to be a company that invests, or a company that flips houses, or an individual. The point is that the ordinance has to apply equally to everybody. Otherwise, it's going to be challengeable.
And I don't think, in terms of it's not, if a property, because again, I think what the council president raises in the term of the definition where it says which is not legally occupied. So again, if somebody goes away for part of the year and then comes back to New Jersey for the remainder of the year, that house.
We've never enforced it in that type of situation.
That would still be legally occupied.
Yeah, it would be legally occupied. You could go on a 3-month vacation if
Right.
you want. You're still living in the house.
And that was Jack, you mentioned if any other council had an issue, that was my main issue. Aside from that, I mean, if you have recommendations on, what you think the fee schedule would be, or if you could point out somewhere in the ordinance that you don't like, we
here's
could
another
discuss
one.
it.
I mean, it's like I said earlier, there's an abundance of empty houses in this town. If I own a house, and actually, I know I was in this situation a few years ago for a year or two when I was military and had to leave unexpectedly. I had to rent my house out. And it was and we weren't in the depressed situation we are with houses now. It was very difficult to get somebody to get into the house within a week or two. Sometimes it was a little bit more than 30 days to rent it out. And in 145-47, if you have a house that you're going to rent and it's vacant for 30 days or more, then you fall into this.
That would be 60 days. It's 60 days with the instance that you're referring to.
Mr. Council President, may I address this issue since I have some military experience? I think I can answer the question.
Sure.
Well, it's not only military, it's anybody.
No. It's a specific to the military, the issue that I want to address, because you raised it as a military issue.
Well, I encountered it, but go ahead, Dennis. I'm sorry.
There is a federal statute called the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, and in any situation where someone is not transferred to another place but deployed from a current duty station for some period of time overseas, all they have to do is assert the Soldier and Sailors Relief Act, and that essentially stays all proceedings in any court in the United States. So in that case, the soldiers and sailors and airmen and whomever else would be protected, and we would be not only required to adhere to it, but we would gladly adhere to it. I used to do it when I was a military lawyer on behalf of Marines and sailors who were stationed overseas where I was. So, and that takes care of the immediate burden for folks.
All right, and then the other two big things is, the first one is, I think we put in a mechanism into place to put this in with the tax office, where if somebody, or
administration
the mortgage
did
folks.
that, I believe the day after it was mentioned, or around that time.
Yeah, it became apparent to us here that some of the folks who were in this business were not asking all of the proper questions, and they were just relying on a search of liens, and charges that have not yet become liens would not show up. So what we did is we worked out between our tax collector, who is the search officer for the township, and our director of community development, Mr. Benedetti, is that when the search officer is filling out the form describing all of the liens that are on their property, she will communicate with Mr. Benedetti to include monies that are owed to the township that have not yet become liens, all on one document, so that the individuals that are seeking the information have all of the information that they need.
And then I can see it, this is an uphill battle for me, so I'm going to point out one more thing and then end my discussion on this. 145-49, violations and penalties. Any owner who is not in full compliance of this article, or who otherwise violates any provision of this article or the rules and regulations issued herein, shall be subject to a fine of not less than $500 a day. Well, not less than 500 and not more than 1,000 for each offense. Every day that this violation continues to constitute a separate and distinct offense. So if we're fining somebody the maximum $1,000 a day, the average home value in this town, I would estimate, would be about $120,000. Within a 4-month period, we would own this property.
Well, I guess the penalty, Jack, would be something that the court would have to impose for violating, like if a summons issues for failing to register, for instance, then the owner would have the right to appear before the municipal court judge and explain whatever circumstances they would have as to why or why not the property was registered. And the fine would only apply to, under state law, for a violation of any municipal ordinance. The penalty a municipal court judge can impose is up to $2,000.
For each offense.
For each.
But this specifically says each individual one is a unique.
Yes, and that would be true, though. I'm not.
So a judge could realistically go in there reading this ordinance and fine you $120,000. Because each individual one is a unique offense.
Yeah, well, that would be true, though, of any, violation of any, what I'm saying is that if there was a violation of a municipal ordinance, whether it's this or another one, and it's an ongoing violation, whether the ordinance says what this says or not, each and every violation each day is a distinct violation. This provision actually limits what the court can do, because typically for violations of municipal ordinances it could be up to 2,000, and this is limiting it up to 1,000. So in a way, it's actually more limiting than what state law applies.
And if I may, ultimately that is a judicial decision. It's not our decision. The summonses are issued and the judge decides if it's a situation, typically, if it's a situation where the bank or the individual exercises his or her right to go before the court, the judge will typically find that there is a single violation. Now, what this does, and that's typical language in almost all ordinances of any kind, not just for this purpose, if the judge finds in some instances that the person is deliberately not doing something that they should do, the judge always has the option of determining that there are multiple violations of the ordinance, but that's up to the judge to determine. It's not something that we do administratively or that our code enforcement officers can do. And as Mr. Bayer says, that this is actually limiting the typical ordinance in New Jersey. I believe it may now be up to $2,500. It may be up to $2,500, and it also typically would include up to 90 days in jail for an ordinance violation, which this one does not.
And 99.9% of municipal ordinance violations don't end up either with the individual in jail or with a fine of anywhere near what we're talking about. So it gives the court discretion just to sort of evaluate the circumstance.
And to close my comments on this, like I said, I see where this is going. I remember sitting in here listening to this 3 years ago and hearing what the intent was and seeing the way it's put into place today. I disagree with it. I don't believe it's doing the citizens or the residents any good. And I have to agree with one of the group that came in and addressed the council a month ago. This is nothing but a cash grab. And I have to agree with that individual. I forget who said it, but I agree with it.
Jack, so what are you suggesting? I'm all ears. I don't want you to feel like a victim of council not listening to your suggestions.
I'm done.
So what are you suggesting happen with the ordinance?
What would be nice, Jason, to be honest, is if we're going to do this and we're going to do it the right way, and I'm spitballing here, is we might want to get a council member or two to sit down with some of the folks that came in and complained and go over this with maybe code enforcement and see where it can be adjusted, and then present a new ordinance from those discussions. We do have the ability to create a committee, correct?
Yeah, sure.
Go figure. I'm learning stuff.
That's right.
We've always had the ability to form committees. I think they have been done, and since I've been on council, a lot of committees have been formed, and a lot of committees have not really done much.
I would be more than willing to sit on the committee for this.
Council President, if I may, I do resent the implications that we are checking obituaries and going out and finding vacant properties as such, because that is not happening, I can assure you. The contractors that are working on houses that pull permits for houses are not being subject to this ordinance, because we do know that they're under construction and they are doing the necessary repairs to put this property back on the market. Somebody's painting a house inside, putting new carpets in, it doesn't take 2 years to do that. And you implied $1,000 fine. It's $1,500 and not $1,000, and that's 2 years. The first year vacant's $500. And to imply that this ordinance was not done right the first time when this council put it together, I think is an insult to your fellow council members, because I believe they did this right. They answered the concerns of the residents. They did go out there and look into this problem that we had in the community, which is vacant properties, and they found a solution, a tool that was given to the communities by the state that communities across New Jersey have taken advantage of, and it's not a cash cow. We're not looking for cash from this. We're looking for properties to be maintained and occupied. And yes, there's cash that comes out of this, but this is funding that comes as a result of incentives and deterrence.
How much money did we put into the general budget this year from this ordinance?
This ordinance last year, I want to say, brought in about 500,000.
511,000.
On mark with that this year. And you know what that tells me? That tells me we have a serious vacant property problem in this town, as other towns do, and as other towns have adopted this ordinance. I did a real quick dirty search on this and found 18 towns in Burlington County like that have the same ordinance, the same fines. As a matter of fact, one of the complainants that was in my office begging not to have to do this because he bought a house for less than $30,000 and he's trying to get out of registering a house because he wants to fix it up and profit from it. Well, that's fine. I want him to fix it up, but don't come and try and manipulate our ordinance and say and tell me that, oh, well, I just bought a house in Tabernacle and they don't have this problem there. I don't have to do this in Tabernacle. But it was funny because I just handed him the ordinance from Tabernacle and said, they have the same ordinance we have. Why you weren't charged there, I don't know, but
how much of that $500,000 from this ordinance did we put back into those vacant properties to maintain them?
Those vacant properties are not ours to invest in. We can't invest.
So we can't go in there and cut the grass and at least maintain.
We do go in and cut the grass, and we do go in and fix problems on properties, but when we do that, we use budgeted overtime money and we assess a lien to the property. That's our mechanism in order to recoup our funding, our investment into cleaning up the properties. We don't have the ability to charge people for vacant property ordinance. That's not what the state gave us in this law that they passed. They gave us a law that allows us to create deterrence for people having properties that are unkept, and incentives for people to have vacant properties that may be waiting for the market to change so they can get more for their property, or just like banks who, for some odd reason, don't seem to care and are not putting the properties, although they are starting to because investors are buying them, but and maybe that's because they're at that $5,000 incentive that we have in our ordinance. And that's how you get people to do things or not do things. You have to have the incentives to get them to do things, and that's what our fee structure does. And you have to have deterrence for people to not do things, and that's what our ordinance does. Our ordinance allows for those deterrents so people don't.
I personally think the houses are being sold because it's been 7 years since the housing bubble popped. Well, and it's about time for things to start correcting.
And you may be right, you may not. There's bigger people out there than you and I that analyze this every day and have other opinions on it. But I kind of believe that our ordinance and other ordinances throughout the state of New Jersey are impacting this change, that are incentivizing people to have vacant properties to get them back on the market where they belong. And as you mentioned, I agree with you. I'd like to see all of our vacant properties occupied and kept up to date. But when they're not, I think it is our responsibility as local government to take action, to take the steps necessary. Whatever extremes that they may seem harsh, but they have to be done in order to protect the residents that are doing the right thing. So we can't just turn our backs. I had a gentleman call me today. House has been burned down for 1.5 years. Why isn't something done? Well, we're jumping right on it because we've been pushing this, and now they're going to be coming to court because somebody's just ignoring the issue and they're not fixing this. But it's a big town. We can't get on every property that quick. But when they're brought to our attention, and residents bring most of these vacant properties to our attention, we find some of them out there, but we don't just pick houses and say, oh, that one must be vacant, and we'll charge them or have them register. We get complaints. Residents call us. I got 3 houses on my block, and what are you doing about it? We go out and check. They're vacant. We apply the ordinance. So we're answering the concerns of the residents. I think this ordinance does, and I think council did it right the first time when they did it.
Dave, you mentioned the state, and I mentioned this to Andy. I'm requesting that he look into this. I was told that our definition of a vacant property is out of compliance with the state definition.
Well, I think as Dennis pointed out, the court, our local court, has already upheld the ordinance as valid. So, I think from a bank challenge, so I'm sure the definition is fine, but we can certainly review it.
If you could just
Yeah.
check and then maybe send an email through Amy on what you discovered. Thank you.
Council President, Dex asked the council if he's the only one to have the problem with this ordinance, and I think the question is, what is the solution? We've sat here, most of us, for many council meetings and had people come up to the podium complaining about the vacant properties. We put a plan in place, and now you're saying it's not conducive to our town. What are we supposed to do? We try to answer or come up with some kind of solution for the residents. No one likes their empty properties. We've heard many people come up to the podium, and this is a mechanism to get those vacant properties empty. You say you don't like it, but I haven't really heard a solution or a different way for us to go regarding this property maintenance here. It's not like
You did recommend a committee, correct?
okay, my apologies. You did recommend the committee, but the committee to do what? Most of the committee members are going to be the ones that was at the meeting who don't like the fine.
You're going to have at least one or two council members in attendance.
But most of the residents that I've heard are telling us, do something about the vacant properties. That's what this does. We does something about the vacant properties.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that was at the podium I don't remember the meeting, was more so complaining about the fees.
Okay, listen to what you said. You said do something about the vacant properties.
That's what the residents were asking us to do.
And all we're doing is collecting money for the vacant properties.
To allow the vacant for something to be done to the vacant properties.
And we're collecting money because they're vacant properties.
But we're not doing anything to the vacant properties.
It's not our properties. That's like me going to your house
properties.
and doing something to a property that you may not live in. I can't come into your property.
My leads are getting deep.
So should we relieve all the fines that we collect for people speeding down the roadway? You named the numerous ordinances that are on the books that are enforced every day here that establish the quality of life in our community. Do we just say, well, we don't want to charge? So if we took the fee structure out of this, would you be okay with the ordinance then? Is the ordinance okay without the fee structure? Because if that's where your biggest problem is,
I think the biggest problem is the hidden fee factor.
There's no hidden fee. The fee is in black and white. It's in the ordinance. I don't see where anything's hidden. We tell you right up front.
I've been coming to these council meetings for at least 6 years, and normally, this is an exception. Normally when you come into this room, there's a maximum of 6 people sitting in this room. Because the residents know when they come in here, they're going to get a bobblehead effect. They're going to come up here, talk at the podium, and the folks up here are going to go, yep, 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 and that's all they're going to get.
Once again,
and then they don't come back here. They don't come back here.
We're getting off topic, but that means nothing. Maybe some of the residents aren't coming to the meetings for a reason. It's not, maybe they have better things to do. Or maybe they reach out to council members via email. Maybe they reach out to council members via telephone. Mm-hmm. You don't have to come to a meeting every Monday and Wednesday to get a point across.
You're right.
So
I have had phone calls and I have had emails as well.
So I don't want to get off topic. I will ask if any other council member has anything to say about the discussion on the ordinance.
I had my question answered by Mr. Gonzalez.
As I indicated earlier, my question was about the legally occupied portion of the vacant property definition, and Andy, again, if you could check with the state's definition and get that to all of the council members.
Sure.
Thank you. Hearing no other comments, we'll move forward to the discussion and possible appointment of Pemberton Township Municipal Utility Authority to fulfill a alternate number 2 position Council, Dr. Cathers recently resigned, and the position is now vacant. We received 2 letters of interest, one being Gay Chavez, the other being Donna LaFay, both pleasant, intelligent, and well-rounded applicants that have lived in the township and served in our community for an extended period of time. Before we get started, I'd just like to say, although both are qualified, and I initially thought about having someone else receive the opportunity to serve on a board, I do think Donna is extremely qualified and too qualified to pass up for this position. So I'm letting it be known that my support will be with Donna LaFay for this one.
I would support that nomination.
Any others? Jack's giving me thumbs up.